superstar academic. So how did he become so well known? He first came to national prominence in Canada in 2016 in a debate about new laws on gender identity. Bill C-16 made it an offence to refuse to call someone by their chosen gender pronoun. Jordan Peterson argued that this would infringe free speech, while some supporters of the bill...
What's up, YouTube? Today we're using a video from Honor King to essentially help define the feminist movement for what it is, as, well, just a glorified male hate movement. No different than any other hate movement in past history. So, let's get into it, shall we?
Prejudice. From there, his YouTube star took off, and he has now over 1 million subscribers. And his videos, where he talks everything from identity politics, which we've touched on, to the Bible, to Disney movies, have been viewed over 150 million times. Gosh, that's about the same number of viewers we have on this programme. Last year, he supported ex-Google employee James Damore, who had been fired for suggesting men and women have different interests due to biological differences. And his latest book, 12 Rules for Life, has taken him on a global tour promoting his ideas, and just this week he sold out the 1,000-seater Emmanuel Centre around the corner here in Westminster. So Jordan, you've done endless interviews. You've been publicising your book, and they've generated plenty of heated debate.
No, I actually sold out the Apollo. It had 5,000 seats.
All right, stop boasting. Do you think, though, because of the heat that has been generated, that your views have been misrepresented at times?
Oh, definitely, but that's, that's part and parcel of the process. I did take a very forceful stance, let's say, against some of the excesses of the radical left-wingers, and it's in their best interest to paint me as somehow a figure of the extreme right, because then I don't have to be contended with. But, I mean, it's easy for people's views to be oversimplified in a very large public debate.
I mean, in terms of some of the issues, I mean, you say you've been painted as an extreme right-winger.
No, some people have tried that. Not very successfully, but they've tried it.
And you came to prominence in part over your opposition to this law that we just talked about in Canada, proposing the use of preferred pronouns for transgender people. Just for clarity...
Mandating them.
Yeah.
Right.
Saying that you should do it.
No,
but,
that you had to do it.
Right, you had to do it by law. But just for clarity, do you think a trans woman is a real woman?
I don't really like the way those questions are formulated. I don't know what that means. What do you mean a real woman?
Well, I'm asking you, in your mind, it depends what you think a real woman is, but do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think that people should be treated with respect and dignity if they happen not to fit easily into a gender category. That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's a matter of definition. And I actually think it's a foolish argument in some sense. Because what do you mean by real?
Well, I mean, you've just clarified that, though. You don't think that a trans woman is a woman. And do you think that that is what is behind or explains your opposition to this idea of a law mandating you to use a preferred pronoun, is because you don't actually believe that that's the truth, that a trans woman is a woman, and therefore you can't use that pronoun?
No, that's not my argument at all.
Really?
Yeah, really. My argument is that the government shouldn't compel voluntary speech.
Okay, now, everybody, here's the first factor I want to point out on how the feminist movement is technically just a male hate movement at this point. Notice how Jordan Peterson made his opposition on that bill perfectly clear. He doesn't think you should put mandates on freedom of speech. Tell people, like, what can you say publicly, essentially. Or, like, putting restrictions on freedom of speech, that you can only use your speech this way. Essentially, you have to say this, even if you don't really want to do it. That's basically what it was. But notice how she doesn't want to touch that. She instead wants to find some way to redirect this conversation and find a way to make him out to be a villain of some kind. that like he doesn't believe trans women are real women. Well, technically, biological science says they're not. It's just a matter of how you identify yourselves. But anyways, that's the actual real goal here. Because just like every other hate movement in past history, the thing about the feminist movement is, well, the rule it has is that you can't say or do anything that will paint that hate movement in a bad light. If you do, everybody else who's involved in that feminist movement will actively turn on you. They'll treat you like a deserter. That was the same case with the Salem witch trials, the Christian Crusade, and yes, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, and now the feminist movement. Now, personally, I also had a very similar red pill moment to Jordan Peterson, which I will include in a link in the description below. But instead of it being about mandating free speech, it was a church that I was part of since 2016 till 2024, trying to issue mandates on how people can practice their faith at that church. And if you didn't agree to that mandate, you were not allowed to volunteer to serve God in the way you find enjoyable. You were not allowed to participate in their Bible studies. The list goes on. And I just made it very clear that, hey, I would rather get a wife from overseas than entertain this historically horrific and appalling practice. I honest God would.
Your argument is, and
no,
you've
but
made
that's
it very
really
clearly.
it. No, but that's exactly it. There's
but the
no
motivation
there's
behind
no motivation behind it.
But you don't believe
I wouldn't put
is a
everything
woman.
on online in my life to take the stance I did unless I had thought that through very deeply. And I've thought it through very deeply. There aren't hidden motivations that have to do with some arbitrary prejudice against trans people.
Okay.
It's pure and simply this. There's never been a time in English common law history where the government compelled speech, and the Canadian government dared to do that. And that was unacceptable. And they masked it with this show of compassion for the oppressed, and I don't buy it.
Right, but you would, as I think you said, at an individual level, if somebody asked you, if somebody asked you to use a particular pronoun, you would do so.
Well, I have.
You have.
She asked him a question, then refused to let him answer it until he took over the conversation. And notice how, when he explained his answer, it went in one ear and out the other, and instead of responding to his answer, she made another assumption.
Right,
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
Let's talk about feminism. Are you a feminist?
No, not as it's currently defined, certainly not.
No. Well, in any other definition?
Well, I think that anybody who doesn't think that the competitive landscape should be opened up for equality of opportunity is not thinking. And so everyone's interests are better served if people have as equal access to opportunity to display their talents and to manifest their talents in the world as possible. So in that sense, certainly. But feminism now, and this is why it's so deeply unpopular, a very small minority of women in the UK identify as feminists. And the reason for that is it's primarily become an ideological weapon. And it's an ideology that I detest, actually, the ideology that it's associated with, collectivist ideology.
Right. I mean, okay, and that's your view about feminism. Aisha, are you a feminist?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a very proud feminist. And when I was a special advisor in government, I worked on women and equality issues. And I'm very proud, actually, of a piece of legislation I got on the statute book with my former boss, Harriet Harman, the Equality Act in 2010, which strengthened our anti-discrimination laws. And I fought very hard to get more women into public life, into the Labour Party. And I'm very, very proud of being a feminist, hence my pink dress.
Oh, well, all right. Obviously reverting to type then in the pink dress.
Absolutely, well.
You would like men to regain or reclaim their strength physically, mentally and morally. Is that broadly correct?
I would say morally, fundamentally, but I think the other things go along with that.
Right, and if that
But it isn't men precisely who I'm speaking to. It's people. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm actually interested in individuals, and I'm interested in their fortification against tragedy. You know, every time I do an interview, the interview is always political. It's always political.
Well, the clue is in the title of this programme. We are the Daily Polity.
No, fair enough. No, look, fair enough. And I'm not casting aspersions at this programme, but the fundamental news that's important about what I'm doing isn't the political element. And the people who talk to me don't talk politically. They say they've watched my lectures.
But part
and
of it is that I think for a lot of people the kind of personal does become the political.
Or the political becomes the personal.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the...
Yeah, but in this situation, a lot of people are wrong, because primarily what's happening is people are watching my lectures, and as a consequence, their lives are improving dramatically.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure people are like, have had a huge conversion after, and they're much happier once they've been...
Yeah. First of all, it's not a conversion. It's a change of mind. A conversion, madam, is when you decide to change from one religion to another. That is a conversion. This, what Jordan Peterson is saying, is a change of mind due to a revelation of seeing the truth. That's what these channels are all about. It really is. However, just like other hate movements in past history, the feminist movement does see it as conversion, because hate movements often escalate to more like a religious belief. Well, just like other hate movements in past history, they basically gather up on this overly religious ideal that this particular group of people, in this case men, are the bad guys. And that's how it's been historically speaking, with the Salem witch trials, as well as the Christian Crusade. And we have to do everything in our power to dominate them. If you essentially refuse to do this, we don't want you. That's how it is. And I will admit, just like other hate movements in past history, this feminist movement, well, it never really got addressed appropriately. It never did. And just like other hate movements in past history, since it never got addressed appropriately, the problems it was causing started to continue to escalate with every new generation. And by the time it got to a generation where we're saying, hey, we had enough. We're not doing this anymore. We're walking away, or in some cases, we're getting our passports and getting away from overseas. That's usually around the exact same time where the people who participate in this hate movement, in this case the feminist movement, have been pointing fingers at men. That's what this is. To the extent where you just become completely codependent on them. You have. Because you can't take in any real form of accountability. And when the men leave, that's when a whole bunch of chaotic situations happen. Because, hey, all the people who participate in the feminist movement, they now have to bear the backing weight of all the responsibilities they were trying to shove onto the men, because the men aren't doing it anymore. When the men leave, they leave that behind for you to deal with. That's the accountability right there.
What I would like to do is kind of almost, I think at the moment the discussion about feminism is very divisive, and sometimes it can sort of be like, okay, men have to lose and women have to gain. Actually, everybody has a lot to gain by greater equality. Now, whether you get the equality of outcome that you want, I think only time will tell. But certainly, equality of opportunity is very important. And actually, a lot of men would benefit from that. So I think a lot of men are having a lot of crises at the moment in terms of mental health, suicide issues, their own sense of identity, because I think some of the stereotypes put on men are quite limiting for them as well. I think they make men quite unhappy as well.
The devil's in the details with regards to equality, because I'm an advocate of equality of opportunity. But I think the idea outcomes, that's an appalling doctrine.
Why?
All right. Well,
because you have to produce an unbelievably potent bureaucracy to make the ever greater and ever finer distinctions that are necessary to enforce equality of outcome. How many group differences are you going to equalize?
And I would also like to say that I agree with Jordan Peterson that equality of opportunity is good. Equality of outcome is appalling, historically speaking. Because let's face it, just like every other hate movement in past history, this feminist movement, it wants equality of outcome because it doesn't like it when men succeed where women are failing. That's literally what the goal is. For example, how many times, if you're an employer, how many times have you seen it where, hey, you have employees at work and you see that, hey, this guy, he's working really hard, he's succeeding, but then and you're thinking about giving that guy a promotion or a pay raise, but then all of a sudden, this feminist woman comes in, she sees that, she sees that this male employee is succeeding, she sees it, and she doesn't like it because she's not succeeding, but he is. And as a response to that, the feminist employee will make a false allegation on that male employee that's succeeding. And it'll just continue to be one thing after another and after another after another until that male employee gets fired. Because, hey, you can't lose to a man. That's literally the reason why feminist movement wants equality of outcome. Because you can't lose to a man by any means, by any regards. And that's what's the exact same thing with every hate movement in past history. Which is, hey, if you're a part of this hate movement, you cannot lose to this particular group of people. If you it's going to create you have to respond to it with a lot of hostilities in many different shapes and forms. That's literally what it is. And as for the male suicide rate, she keeps putting the blame on the men. But would you really study it, you're going to notice that the reason for the male suicide rate is exactly what the feminist movement is promoting about men. How many times have we heard women say, oh, men only think with their dicks, or men are the source of all things evil on the planet, and women are pure and innocent angels who can do no wrong? But here's the thing, the feminist movement doesn't want to touch that, because that would mean painting the feminist movement in a bad light. That's what it's going to do.
Is it just gender and sex? How many genders?
No, so
gender and ethnicity? How many genders?
I think
how many
what
ethnicities? How many races?
We'll let Aisha answer.
I think what people are trying to do with this, and certainly as somebody who has sought to sort of do this myself, I think you set yourself ambitions for what you would like to see, and then you try and remove as many of the structural barriers and obstacles. So you try and create that fair crack of the whip and that equality of opportunity to see where you get to with the outcomes.
That's
now,
fine.
We are in very early stages. It's only 100 years since women got the vote in this country. We have had a long established.
Okay, I could be wrong about this, but madam, you are way too young to have any real involvement in the work of Susan B. Anthony. You are way too young for that. And I think it was more than just, well, Candace is New England. I don't know how that boy thinks it's work in New England. But in America, hey, it was more than 100 years when women got the right to vote. Because pretty sure the history of Susan B. Anthony was more than 100 years ago. Pretty certain about that. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain. But yeah, she keeps bringing that up. But here's the question. Are you just going to bring up that one piece of history? Or are you going to bring up the entirety? Because I see so many feminists keep saying that, hey, women didn't have the right to vote because of male patriarchy. But at the same time, I don't see any of these feminists willing to mention, hey, maybe the right for women to vote was a huge debate because at the same time, these women didn't want to deal with the responsibilities of voting like being signed up for selected draft. Did you ever bother questioning maybe that was the possible situation? Or the dilemma? That hey, women didn't want to be put in selected draft, so maybe that caused the problem of why they weren't having the right to vote? Do you ever think about that? Anyways, that's all I got time for today, everybody. If you like this content, by all means, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll